is interview of June Christie for Primary Sources for Professor Fred Israels. We have Amie Hodgkinson and Andrew Carr as the interviewers.
Other group members include Danielle, Jennifer, and Joshua, who are not in attendance.
All right. So June, when and where were you born?
I was born in London, Ontario, June 3rd, 1931. And I was the second daughter of Edith.
Hold on. I think it cut you off. So we'll have to start again. I didn't think it was recording there for a second. It wasn't. I'll erase that one. Okay. All right. So we have June Christie for an interview for Primary Sources for Professor Fred Israels. We have Amie Hodgkinson and Andrew Carr as the interviewers.
Other group members include Danielle, Jennifer, and Joshua, who are not in attendance.
June, could you introduce yourself to us? When and where were you born?
My name is June Marie. My maiden name was McKinley. I'm Christie. I married an Arthur Christie. I was born in London, Ontario, June 3rd, 1931. I was the second daughter of Edith and Murdoch McKinley.
All right. And where did your family come from? Were they from here in London?
No, my father was born in Glasgow, Scotland. Yes. And my mother was born in England, in Wales.
Okay.
I'm not sure of the city.
And when did they come over here to Canada?
My father came to Canada as his mother brought her family of 12 children, she was a widow, to Canada when my father was, I believe, 10 years old. And they settled in Peterborough, Ontario.
Okay. And when did your mother come to Canada?
My mother came to Canada when she was 20 or 21, and she had started her nursing studies in London, in England, and she finished them here in London, Ontario.
So she started them in London, England, and finished them in London,
here.
Ontario.
London, Ontario.
What made your mother come to London, Ontario, out of all of the places to go in Canada?
Oh, because her brother had come before her, had come to Canada before, and he had come to London, Ontario. So she came here.
And why had he chosen to come here?
My uncle.
Your uncle.
I don't honestly know. I think he came because work was very difficult or hard to find in England. And I think his mother, who would be my grandmother, had come to Canada and settled here. So he came here.
Okay, so your family had immigrated here piece by piece.
Yes.
Everyone came to this area.
Yes, yes.
And what about your father? Why had his family chosen to come to London?
Because his eldest sister, I believe, no, I don't think that's right. You're asking me to go back a lot of years. My grandmother had come to London because her daughter, Elizabeth, had purchased a house here. And she came here to live in the house that her daughter had purchased. It was on King Street, London.
You mentioned that your parents came here to have more employment opportunities.
Yes, my mother came to finish her nursing.
Yeah.
Because her mother was here.
Mm-hmm.
Her mother came, and her mother had settled up in the North Country. But in order for my mother to finish her nursing. She came here to the Ontario Hospital here in London because that's where nursing was offered
Okay.
at no cost, I believe.
And so when she was finished her program, was she able to find a job in this
Oh,
area?
yes. Yes, she became a nurse at Ontario. Yes, the Ontario Hospital here in London, the mental hospital. But she also worked at Victoria Hospital.
So she worked at two different hospitals. And what about your father? Was he able to find employment in London?
Yes, he worked at the Ontario Hospital here in London. That's where my mother and dad met.
I was going to ask.
Yeah.
And what did he do at the hospital?
He was an attendant.
Okay.
He had basic nursing education, just basic, very basic. But he worked as an attendant on the wards at the Ontario Hospital. He was a male attendant.
So in that generation, having a mother who was a nurse and a father who was an attendant, it's an interesting dynamic because the female parent is seemingly more educated than
Yes,
father.
yes.
Did that have an impact at all?
I think it did. I do believe it did. There were two opposite personalities. My dad was a fun-loving, happy, liked to laugh, but my mother was very much dogmatic in what she believed and the way children should believe and behave. But I could get away with murder with my dad. I couldn't get away with murder with her, but my dad loved to laugh, and so did his family. They were a very happy Scottish family.
Interesting.
My mother she had two brothers, and the one brother died in the sanatorium in up near North Bay with TB. At that time, TB was rampant, and he died up there. That was Harold, and he had been up north because that's where his mother went, and he had worked on the building of the highways up north. They were really developing the north at that time, and so he developed TB, and that's where he died. And her other brother settled in, he settled here in London, and he married a nurse from the hospital here in London, and they settled in up north. It'll come. I can't remember the name. And my uncle became an insurance agent and ran his own business up there. The name will come to me. Yeah. I think I have Alzheimer's. But I can't remember that. But I have one sister, Irene, who was also born in June. 3 years. She's 3 years my elder.
And how were the sibling dynamics between you and your sister?
But a lot like dynamics between siblings. She was the elder sister who told the youngest sister how to jump and how far to jump. She was definitely the boss. She will tell you, or she believes, that she helped raise me because, see, my father took a stroke when he was 31, 32, which left him paralyzed down his right side. So my mother had to go back to work. So she went back to nursing, which left my sister and I at home by ourselves. My dad was in hospital for, might have been a year and a half, 2 years. So that left my sister and I at home much of the time on her own. So my sister became the stronger of the two. So she became a sibling mother to me.
And would you agree that she helped to raise you, or would you disagree with that?
if I'm talking to her, I would disagree. But if I'm speaking to you, I would agree. I really relied on her in my young days.
And how old would you have been when your father had a stroke?
I think I was 9, maybe.
So 9 and 12.
Yeah.
It's a lot for a 9 and a 12-year-old to
Oh, yeah.
be dealing with.
Oh, it was.
So
But
that
we didn't realize it. You know, we really didn't. That everyone else was different.
Yeah.
We were happy.
So that must have had an impact on your home life as a child and what it was like to just at home.
Yes.
Can you describe a bit about what home was like, even just the buildings or what you did at home?
We lived in apartments. We never owned a house. There wasn't any money. But we lived in apartments. And our mother expected us to be self-sufficient, to be able to get our own meals, and to care for ourselves. She sent our laundry out, so we had to wash our undies. But other than that, she sent all our laundry out. So we were quite self-sufficient. I was always the quiet one. I still am. Of the two, I'm not nearly as strong as my sister is.
So what would your apartment have been like that you lived in at that point? How
The
big
first
was it?
apartment I remember. Now this is when my dad took the stroke. It was on Dundas Street between Lyle and Adelaide. And it was upstairs, and it was a one-bedroom apartment with a small living room about the size of my bedroom, and a long kitchen. And we didn't have a kitchen table or anything. We had like a booth, a table with two benches. That was our dining room table.
Interesting.
Yes.
Did you have your own bedroom in the apartment? No?
Well, we did. Until my dad, that's where my dad took the stroke, was when we were in that apartment. And Mom and Dad slept on a couch, like a roll-out couch in the living room. And my sister and I had the bedroom. And they slept in the living room because at that time, my dad was working at the hospital and he worked shifts. So that meant that he could come in and just go to bed, not disturb. We could go to bed and get our rest.
So your parents slept in the living room, your sister and yourself slept in the bedroom.
Yes, yeah. Until my dad took the stroke.
Now, in this apartment, did you have electricity, running water, all indoor
Yes,
plumbing, all those?
We had a small bathroom, a long, narrow kitchen. We had an ice box. We didn't have a refrigerator. We had an ice box. And an electric stove. And a sink, you know. Just that. And in the living room, we had a pull-out couch and 2 chairs and a radio.
Sounds like very close quarters for 4 people.
It was.
Was the radio your source of entertainment?
Yes.
Can you remember anything about like sitting around the radio with your
yes.
sister? Or...
On Monday night, there was a program came on, Lux Presents Hollywood. And that was, we had to listen to that. There would be a play on for an hour, and we listened to that. And then also on, I think it was on Saturdays, there was a radio program came on, Grand Central Station, and it would be a play. So our entertainment was listening to the plays on the radio and reading. That was the entertainment. And you could go to the show where we lived on Dundas Street, that what they called the Palace Theatre was just down the street from where we lived. And you could go there every second week. My mother would give me a quarter And that would take me to 2 shows on a Saturday. Shows were 10 cents. So I could go to 2 shows on a Saturday and have 5 cents for candy.
And what kind of candy would you buy with your 5 cents?
Whatever I could get for 5 cents. I don't remember.
You weren't picky? You weren't picky?
Oh no.
Now, would that be considered like a decent amount to spend on candy at the time? Or would that be like not a lot? You wouldn't get a lot for that?
You wouldn't get a lot.
No.
You had to make it last.
To make it last.
Yes, yes.
And
And sometimes instead of using my money for that, as I got older, it would be to go on the streetcar to Springbank.
What would you do when you got out to Springbank?
Walk around, look at things. I used to think it was a big thing to climb up the hill to go up to where what's up the hill up there? Reservoir Park. I thought that was really something to go up there to look at the reservoir. I was easily amused.
How long would it have taken you to take the streetcar to Springbank from downtown?
Probably about an hour.
About an hour.
Yeah. And it was right from Adelaide and Dundas. I can't remember whether we had to change or not.
Was Springbank like a busy place at that point?
No, it was a nice, gentle place to be. But across Springbank Drive, where all the stores, are now at Byron, there was a little amusement park there, and there was a Ferris wheel. Now, elderly people in London should remember that about the Ferris wheel, or was it a roller coaster? One or the other. But that was, and we could ride the little train too.
And how much would a ride out to Springbank have cost you at that point?
I have no idea. No. Might have been a nickel. Wasn't much, because you can't make 25 cents go too far. Even then.
And did you do this all by yourself, or did your sister go with you?
At first she went with me. I remember as time went by, this is when we had moved out to the East End. I must have been old enough to go by myself. And I went to go Springbank or someplace. And I got on the streetcar at Hale and Dundas. And my mother had given me money to buy tickets. So I put it in the box. And I said, I want tickets. And the driver said, you can't buy tickets when you put the money in the box. I said, well, what'll I do? He said, well, I don't know what you're going to do, little girl, but you can't buy tickets because the money's in the box now, and I can't get it out. I said, but I have to get home. Excuse me, and I was in tears. So the nice driver gave me tickets. I was going to cry, welling up. Excuse me.
And how old would you have been when you first went down?
I might have been 7.
So you were young.
Oh yeah, 7 or 8.
And if you weren't going to Springbank, you weren't going to the movies, what would you have done for fun? Did you have any toys that you particularly liked to play with?
We didn't. Play skipping with my friends, and we had ring toss and hopscotch. We always had chalk, so we used to take it from the school. And we would make a hopscotch, and we'd play hopscotch. And we used to play tag a lot. And alleys, marbles. We would make do kids still play marbles? No.
I don't think so.
Oh, I don't think they would either. But we played marbles. Well, it was a boy thing, but the girls used to play marbles too. And if you could get one of those big marbles, that was an agate. And it was the big one because you could shoot it and hit the other ones out of the way. But we used to play a lot of board games. Chinese checkers, all that. That was our entertainment.
So it was group entertainment. You wouldn't necessarily go home and play with a toy alone.
I would play with my dolls.
Okay.
I had 2 or 3 dolls, and I had a baby doll buggy, a little wee doll buggy, and I just loved it. And I used to dress up the cat and put her in it.
So you had pets at your home when you were growing up?
I always had a cat.
Always had a cat. No dogs?
No, I don't remember at that time having a dog. No, they were an expense that we couldn't afford. You couldn't feed the kids and the dog too.
Was it normal for a family to have a cat at that point?
My friends seemed to have. Of course, I had girlfriends, so the girls were more apt to have a cat. One time, my mother couldn't find the cat. She said, "Have you seen the cat?" I was just little, might have been 6 or something. Well, later on, she looked around for the cat. She couldn't find it. She went in my bedroom that my sister and I shared, and the cat was in my baby buggy, all dressed with a bonnet on. I had many ways of amusing myself. I was a very, what you call it, not lonely. What's the proper word for someone who never needs anyone else to amuse them?
Independent?
Yes, I never needed other people around me. I used to make up marvelous stories. Yes.
Do you remember your cat's name? The
No.
one that you put in the buggy?
Oh. Hey, that's 80 years ago.
So when you look back at those stories of your adolescence and your childhood and you reflect on what's happened since then, how has adolescence changed since you experienced it? Are there massive cultural changes that you can think
yes. Oh, yes. There's such a difference between my growing up and when your mother grew up. It's so different. It really is. But you have to remember, or whoever reads this remembers, that I grew up in the Depression, which makes a great difference. Like, frequently, although my dad was one of the really lucky ones because he worked at the Ontario Hospital, and at that time my mother didn't work at all. But he worked there, and the only thing that happened to government employees or Ontario employees was they docked them, I think it was $5 a month or something, off their pay. But frequently our supper was shredded wheat, which I thought was wonderful because I like shredded wheat. Yeah.
So the Depression had a large impact then on your experience.
Yes. Now, it's really strange. That must be one family's difference because your grandfather, my husband's growing up in the Depression years was altogether different than mine because his mother was left with 3 boys and a girl to raise on her own. Her husband had walked out. So, but they lived absolutely differently than I lived because they ate and they ate well. And their mother made sure that they did. Like she would walk blocks to get potatoes and meat. And she'd go up. You would have no idea about this, but there was a meat store up on Dundas Street called Bueller's. And it was nothing to see their front window just piled high with sausage meat. And that's what most people purchased for their meat. I mean, people never had steak. You had either chicken or sausage meat. But my husband's mother, they would walk from where they lived. The boys would walk from Adelaide and Oxford right up to Dundas and Richmond to get that sausage meat because you could buy it up there for 5 cents a pound or something. And that's how his mother fed them during the Depression. But for me, the Depression didn't mean anything, like except that I couldn't have some of the things I wanted. We never had candy or anything like that.
How old were you? So you were born into the Depression, effectively. So
Yeah.
you wouldn't have necessarily known life before the Depression as a child.
No. Well, I was born in 31. When did the Depression hit? 36?
It was 1929, the stock market crashed, 30.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I was born into the Depression, I guess, yes.
So when you think of that, is there a time at which you can kind of see things where they got better, or was it more that it moved from the Depression into the war years and things just stayed as they were?
Yeah, from the Depression into the war years, I think. Or into me starting to old enough to work. Because even when I was in elementary school, I went to, I worked at a booth, and what else? I did any little jobs I could get, even if it was a nickel an hour. I thought it was my first job that I ever had. I worked at what they called the London Arena. That was one of my first jobs. But I worked at a booth across the street from where I lived. And for working there, I forget what they paid. It was very little, but what was enough for me to buy a treat once in a while. That was what the money was used for.
And how old were you when you started this job?
When I started to work,
Yeah.
I was 15 when I started to work. And that was in the summer. This is my first full-time job. Before that, I worked at the booth at what they called the London Arena, where they held dances, roller skating, and all that. It's like the JLC is now, but I worked in the booth there. And I don't know how much I was paid there. But when I was 15, I lied and I got my first full-time job. And that was at McCormick's. And I worked in the factory at McCormick's. I worked on the cookie line,
So
packing cookies.
would you have left school for the job at McCormick's? How old were you when you started school? Would you have started in,
Kindergarten.
so it would have been 4, like we are now, or would you have been a bit older?
No, you had to be 5 to go to kindergarten, I believe. Yeah, it would have been 5.
So you started at 5 and you were done with school by 15.
Oh, yes.
So did you completed your elementary education?
Yes, and then I went to Bill Tech to secure my commercial to be a secretary. And then I quit that because I wanted to work full time. I wanted the money, and I needed the money because we didn't have any money at home. So I quit that. And then I went back. I went to work. And then I went to work at Somerville's when I was 16, working full time. But I went to night school to complete my high school education, to get my commercial education. At that time it was shorthand and typing and all the commercial things that go with it.
So your secondary education was very specific.
Yeah, I only had 2 years of high school before, and then like anything that I got credit for, because the rest of it was done, I had to go to work, so I went to work, and I went back to night school to complete my education. So I never had credit for that. It was just, I needed it to get a job. I needed shorthand for that.
When you think back to your time as a student, what stands out to you the most from that time?
that I was really poor in mathematics, but I loved literature. I wanted to be a writer. My goal in life was to be a writer or to work on a newspaper. I loved literature.
As a young woman, would that have been something that would have been open to you?
If I had completed my education, yes. I think I don't think they would have ever hired me as a reporter, but I might have been able to work on at a paper, job. Yeah, I really loved literature. I really did literature. And I got top marks. I could beat anyone. At school, and I don't know, do they still have literature exams? Probably not.
I think you study literature, but I don't think you have exams. It's more literacy.
Don't you? Because you used to have to read a book, and then your teacher would give you questions on the book. And I always knew because I remembered it all. The other thing I loved was poetry. I wandered only as a cloud that floats on high or vale and hill, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in a sprightly dance. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth to me the show had brought. But oft when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon the inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils.
You have a good memory. How long ago did you read that?
Grade 8. But I loved it.
And it stuck with you.
Oh, yes. I still love it. I think that I always loved poetry. I think that I shall never see a poem lovely as a tree. A tree who looks at God all day and lifts her leafy arms to pray. Poems are made by fools like me, but only God can make a tree. And carrying on, the night was thick and hazy when the Piccadilly Daisy carried down the crew and captain in the sea, and I'm sure the water drowned him, for they never ever found him, and I know they didn't come ashore with me. Ah, 'twas very sad and lonely when I found myself the only population on this cultivated shore. But I built a little tavern in a rocky little cavern, and I sit and watch for people at the door. Ah, my clothes were fat and furry, and I began to fret and worry when I found the moths were eating off the hair. So I pounded and I tanned them, and blah, 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 till I got the fine Morocco suit I wear. And I got that good man Friday just to keep the cabin tidy and to put a Sunday polish on my shoes. And it goes on and on and on.
So you obviously love poetry, and you said you love literature. Why did you not complete your schooling once you left to go to work, so you could pursue your aspiration to become a journalist or work at a newspaper?
Because it was more important that I make money, and I couldn't make money at doing that. I needed money to buy clothes and to live. I was living on my own when I was 16. My mother told me, see, my dad had the stroke, and she didn't have a place for me. My sister had gone out on her own, and she said, you better find a place to live. So I had to get a room. So in order to pay for the room, I had to work. So that's why I didn't complete my education. But I made darn sure my kids get their education.
And when you say you had to get a room, what do you mean?
Well, a room to live. I rented a room in a house, and I had a couch that I could sleep on, and I had to share the bathroom with other people, and I had a little hot plate to cook on, and I had a bar to hang my clothes on, and that was it. And a radio, I had a radio, and I had a pet, it was a goldfish. I loved that little goldfish.
As much as you love the cat?
Yes, I think so at that time.
Hopefully you didn't try and dress it up.
Hmm?
Hopefully you didn't try and dress the goldfish up.
No, I used to go, and it used to go.
So, was it fairly normal for a 16-year-old woman to be living on her own at that time?
No, thank goodness my husband came into my life at that time. And he really guided me. Like, he was 3 years older than I was. And his mother was just a saint. She was I loved her dearly. She had raised those boys, had made a real family, all on her own. She was a hard worker. And she just took me under her wing. And my husband had an elder sister who I became best friends with. She was your great Aunt Shirley, and I just loved her. And then my husband was the eldest, and then he had a brother Alan and a brother Bill. But I just became one of the family, that's what kind of shaped me to being what I am now.
And how old were you when you met your husband?
15.
15. And you started dating when you met? And how did you meet?
At the arena, at the London Arena.
So you met him while you were at work? Or while you were there at leisure time?
Yes. No, I was there because I worked in the booth selling Coke and that kind of stuff. And he used to come there. Roller skating was the big thing then. And he used to come there roller skating. And he'd come up to the booth to get a Coke or ginger ale. But because I worked there, I had free skating. So when I wasn't working, I could go and skate. So I would go and skate. And then he would skate along beside me. He never asked me to skate. He would skate along, try and trip me and various things like that. But I was a better skater than he was. So that's how I met him. And then he asked me one time, he said, could I drive you home? And I said, no. And he said, why not? And I said, because we're not allowed to go home with anyone. We're sent home in a cab from the booth. That's to make sure that we all got home all right. And he said, well, I could drive you home. I said, I can't. I have to go home in the cab. Oh, he went to my boss and asked my boss. Now, as I lived here, my boss lived there. So then I went to my boss and I said, you will know whether I'm home because you'll be able to see Art's, that was my husband's name, my boyfriend's name, Arthur. You will be able to see Arthur's car in my laneway, so you'll know I'm home. Could I do that? So he allowed me to do that. So then I went out with him a few times, and after a while it became a love affair.
And was it regular back in those days to date a few different people before you got married, or was it you generally dated? And...
It was, except, could you imagine your grandfather allowing me to date other people?
Well, maybe not at the same time, but just over the course of your youth, dating, having more than one
No,
boyfriend.
I never dated anyone else.
So you married your
I
first
knew
boyfriend.
other people, but I never dated, no. To actually go out on dates, no.
So how old were you when you married Arthur?
20,
And was that young to marry at that time?
yes. Yeah, let me see. Was I 20 or 21? We were married in 1951.
You would have been.
20.
20.
What would a typical date have been like?
Go to the show,
Go to the show. Okay. What else would you have done on a typical date?
go for a walk.
And what were societal norms in terms of dating? Was it expected that it was something that was done very publicly and you didn't spend
Oh,
time
yes.
alone together, or?
There wasn't much money around, so you might go for a walk. Or he had a car after a while, so we might drive up to his house or go to his sister's or go to one of our friends' family homes type of thing. The other kids that we cheat, they weren't kids, they were young. But it wasn't. And then he was working, so once in a while we would go out for supper, which was a very cheap supper, whatever. Or go to the show was the main thing we did. We didn't do much, really.
So you get married at 20. You've lived on your own for a few years.
Mhm.
What was your husband's occupation?
When we got married,
Mm-hmm.
he worked at Somerville's the same as I did.
So by this point you were working together.
Yeah, we both worked at Somerville's, and I had worked at Somerville's. I started to work at Somerville's. My first job was McCormick's, and I worked at McCormick's in the summer. It was to be just a summer job. But then I found out it was 15 cents an hour there. But Somerville's were paying 19 cents an hour. And I really didn't like it at McCormick's anyway. It smelled and it was hot. So I went to Somerville's to work because they paid 19 cents an hour. And I worked there. And your grandfather at that time, his job, he was an awning installer. He worked for Carter Awning Company. And that's what he did. They big department stores and all that. He used to put up awnings. I go sneeze. Excuse me. And he used to travel out of town a lot then. Excuse me. I've been working at Somerville's for a year or more. And he got a job out there. So we both worked at Somerville's. When we got married, we were both working at Somerville's.
And what did you do at Somerville's, and what did he do?
I started out, I was just working on a lineup, the game department, putting together games. And then I was what they called a statistical quality control inspector. And that meant I went all over Somerville's. Well, it was a big place. You've seen the building, how big it is out there. That's where the Diamond Aircraft is. And so I went around and I checked the litho presses and all of them. Everything that they made, I had to, from machine to machine to machine, to check to make sure. And I worked there for 20 years.
And your husband, he did?
Yeah, he stayed there. He was still there. And he was a shipper and truck driver. And then I left there after 20 years, and I went to the school to work. And I got the job at Prince Charles through my next door neighbor. That's how I did it. She was a secretary at another school, so she said to me, "Why don't you go over?" they're looking for someone at Prince Charles, the principal is. So she said, why don't you go over for an interview? And he's looking for a lady who's older, who maybe has children, that can look after a cut knee or anything like that. He doesn't want some young girl who couldn't handle that. So I went over and was interviewed, and he hired me. So I stayed there for 26 years.
So if we go back to the Somerville, you're both working there, you're just married. What was your life outside of work like? Where did you live?
Oh, we had an apartment, and at first, yes, an apartment for quite a while. We went bowling, and we went to hockey games, and we went to baseball, because Somerville's had a hockey team, and they had a baseball team, and bowling team, so we used to go to watch the men play baseball and hockey, but for the women's baseball team, your grandfather was the coach. So we went to all those games. That was practically that and going out with friends, or going and having a beer or whatever, you know. That was our entertainment.
And what was home life like? How had your quality of life at home changed, improved?
It improved greatly. I was very happy. Your grandfather was a good husband. Oh, we fought like cats and dogs, but, you know, we got along. Yeah.
And where you lived in an apartment, was it bigger or smaller than the one you lived in as a child, or?
It was about the same. It was a bedroom and a living room, a kitchen, and a little dining room. And we stayed there, and then when I was pregnant with your mom, we rented a house, and we lived in a house until she was 2 or 3. I don't exactly remember now. But then we bought a house.
So what time period are we talking here?
What year?
Mm-hmm.
Well, your mom was born in 61, so that probably would have been 63? No. Yeah, well, probably would have been about 63. So I would have to look that up. She was 3, I think, when we moved into the house. Yeah, she was big enough that she could. Yeah. So then we bought a house and moved into the house.
And what type of house was it?
It was a red brick, 2-bedroom, 2.5 bedrooms, a living room, full basement, one bath, and kitchen. Red brick out on Winnipeg Boulevard, out east. It was a lovely house.
It sounds big.
Yeah. After a 1-bedroom apartment, it seemed we had a beautiful long backyard. We had a nice backyard. Yeah.
And how much did you pay for your house when you moved
That money, I think it was 12,000.
And how much? And what would an average year's wage have been at that point?
Well, at that time, they were very sticky about you had to make so much in order to buy a house. And I don't remember. I'm not being evasive, I don't remember. But putting our 2 wages together, it was just enough to buy. But then, of course, we were still both working at Somerville's. And it seemed like the perfect place to buy out on Winnipeg Boulevard because it was that close, you know. And at that time, too, I had to work shifts. Your dad didn't, but I did.
What was your work environment like at Somerville's? Was it unionized? Was it not unionized?
Oh, it was unionized.
And was that status quo to be working in a factory that was a unionized environment, or was that unique to Somerville?
Well, I don't think there was a union when I first went there. But grandfather was a union man, so pretty soon there was a union.
Were you both involved in the development of the union? Was your husband involved in the development of the union?
Arthur was involved, yes, definitely.
And how did you feel about the union being developed at that time?
I knew it was good for me. I knew that I would make more money. I knew that my job would be protected. I am a union person. I really am. I believe in unions. I know there's a lot of bad things about unions, but there's a lot of good things about unions too. So I am still very much a union person.
So was your experience with the union at Somerville a positive one?
Yes, very much so. They couldn't, like, they couldn't tell you you had to do something. Or, you know, you go over there, you do, they couldn't do that. And it wasn't that there was someone with a big whip saying you can't do that. But they just knew if they broke the rules, the union rules, that they would be in trouble with the government. Well, then when I went to the school to work as a secretary, they didn't have any union or anything. So that meant when the summer came, the secretaries in the schools, like in the elementary schools, just got laid off. That was it, you're done. End of school, you're out of work. And you come back in September. You know, if you're counting on your money. And it was the same for Christmas, and it was the same for March break, and it was the same for every stat holiday. You just didn't work and you didn't get paid. And I thought, oh, this doesn't seem right to me. So I contacted a few people who I knew were good union people. I got a union started. And I called a few of the other secretaries to mention it. But most of the people, most of the girls who were secretaries at that time were ladies who lived in the area, and it was quite convenient to work, and they would work the morning and maybe an hour in the afternoon, and that would be it. So they could be home with their kids. Well, that didn't suit me too well. I didn't like being, I needed my money, even though I had a husband working. So anyway, I got a union started. And then we started to get paid. So that was good.
So when you say you got a union started, what would you have, what would have happened to have done that?
Well, I knew people, I forget what you went into. We still got my bids, I would have to go look at it. But I contacted them and said, I think that there could be something started here. So they started to hold meetings, inviting people to come to the meetings and discussing the wages, etc., etc. You see, the girls who worked for Thames Valley, who worked in the main office, they didn't have any problems. But it was the girls in the elementary schools, secretaries of the elementary schools, who were having the problems. The girls in the high schools, some of them would get laid off, but there'd always be a couple of them stay because they needed the secretaries there, you know, to get the reports out and all that. So anyway, that's how that got started.
How did your employer feel about you being involved in starting a union?
I didn't bother to tell them. I'm very sneaky. I don't know. They never were. I don't think they ever held it against me. I honestly felt when I left the board that I was highly thought of. But like even today, there will be people at the board who still remember my name, even though I've been gone a long time. As a secretary, I had a lot of respect. I had a lot of respect with the teachers, which was great. I think I found my niche. right there. I love the kids. Working in an elementary school is wonderful because you get them from this big right up to grade 8. And the grade 8 kids, you know, some of them for years, not now, I don't think they know, but they'd still meet me on the street, Mrs. Christie, how are you? And that was very, very, does your heart good. Just made me feel important. It's nice. But I did love working with the schools. And I liked the teachers. I really did. I'm still friends with the teachers. I have to be.
And what age was it that you left the school?
What, retired?
You retired?
Oh yes, I retired. I was 63.
You left the school in 63?
No, I was 63 when I retired. So you figure it out. You're the master's kid. I never passed mathematics.
This is your interview. It's not my questions to answer.
Oh, pardon?
It's not my questions to answer. This is your interview.
Oh, okay.
So we've spanned quite a bit of time here. We've gone kind of home life in the 30s, 40s, a little bit in the 60s, a bit of the social piece. We've got a bit of the work piece as well. So clearly you were, there was a lot of change that happened. You started in the Depression, you moved through the war years, a little bit more freedom in the 60s, changing roles of women, changing roles of men, changing roles of the economy, changing views of society. What stands out to you the most in that time in terms of just cultural shifts, societal shifts, when you look at what you've gone through versus where we are now?
Truthfully, I feel bad for the young people who are coming up today. I really do. I don't think you'll have nearly the opportunities that I have had. I think it's going to be a hard road for you young people. I really do. I don't think you'll ever have the satisfaction when you're my age that I have, that I've raised a daughter. Now, we only had one daughter, which there's very different for people who've had 5 and 6 children, but we just had the one. And you're going to have to really have it hard to own your own home or be very, very much in debt, which I think is so sad, to be so much in debt in order to own a home. Because I think to own a home is a self-satisfaction. There's a pleasure in knowing, not that I own this, but that this is mine. And if I paint that wall, I'm doing it for me. Or if I fix that door, I'm doing it for me. I think it's very important to own your own home. If you start small, that's okay. You can't live in the Taj Mahal when you're starting out. But you can buy a little home and be happy with what you have. You don't have to have a lot more. As long as if it's a couple, as long as you're happy with each other, you don't have to be, happy with anyone else. No, I think you're going to have a tough road. And I think the world is in a much worse situation now than it was when I was growing up. I think you're going to have a lot more to contend with. So I feel kind of sad. I do, for the young people coming up, for people your age coming up. You're not going to have it easy. And I think all us old senile citizens can do to help you. It's up to us to do it.
Do you think that there are parallels between the experience of today's youth and your youth? That maybe aren't always as evident?
Yes.
Clearly, many differences.
You're going to have to go through all the things that we went through, but you're going to have to go through them in a different way. And I think it's going to be a lot harder for you people. Because when I was growing up, it was very easy, if you got fed up with your job, to go and get another one. You can't do that today, can you?
No, you can't.
So our last question for you is, as a lifelong Londoner, we have a book that we'd just like you to briefly look in. I know you've had a chance to look at a couple pages of it, and just talk about anything that stands out to you. Maybe note the page number that it's on, anything you remember from your
Okay.
time here.
You mean in my lifetime?
Yes. From your experiences when you were growing up or later on when you had your own house.
Oh, I remember
Just anything that
streetcars.
stands out.
And school picnics. And the penny bank savings.
What are the penny bank savings?
That was where we had bank books. And as I remember, the teachers looked after it. But you'd bring, if you had 2 or 3 pennies, you would give them to the teacher, and she'd mark in your little book that you had this, you put it, she'd make up your bank book, and that was yours. And then, I don't know how it was handled, whether it was handled through the school or how it was handled. But I think we must have got our money back, or the parents would have been yelling. And the old normal school, yes. Now, I don't remember the flood of 37, because I would have only been 6. But I remember very much, it says through the hole behind the jail. I can remember going down after I was a young kid, and you could still see the water marks on the houses. You know, the Dundas Hill there, where the water had been. You could see those for years.
So it's quite a devastating flood.
Oh, it was awful. I don't remember that. I don't remember that.
Some of this will predate you.
Yeah. I remember, I don't know whether they still have it, but down at Springbank, see, I just look at this at Cliff Robinson, and remember me just talking about going, Art's mother used to go there to get her meat. Oh, the Redbird bicycle, I remember them. Buy a bicycle from $47.50. Oh, what's this? Isn't that interesting? Now, I don't remember this, but fall games at the Griven Flats next to Pottersburg Creek, Dundas and Hale. Well, yeah. Dundas and Hale is where I said I remember the post office being there. But Pottersburg Creek, you go out way out east, and there's a creek, Pottersburg Creek right there. One time it was a big, big creek. In fact, we used to swim in it in the summer. And I don't remember. The pavilion at Springbank Park.
If you flip to the end of the book, there's some ads and some photos at the back as well that might be
More memorable.
more memorable, yeah.
Oh, Cook's shoes, yes. That's where you bought good shoes. At Cook's, they were expensive.
And these were local kind of mom and pop shops, these?
Yeah, no, Cook's were. I don't know where their shoes came from, because I could never afford to buy them there. See, this is 1955. Western Fair. Oh, this is interesting. There's the old Peachy Company, that's the one for thrills. And Emco, that's Empire Brass, out on Dundas. Their factory was right across from Kellogg's. And Dean Russell Drugs. They were the good drugstore in London. Do you remember that, Dave? No, you wouldn't. Westervelt Business School. And that's where I went to finish my secretarial, where I went at night.
Well, it seems like a lot of that kind of strikes a chord with you.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I think we are almost to the end for you
Okay.
here.
Dean Russell, your grandfather, as a young boy, maybe 12, 14, he worked for Dean Russell, delivering on his bicycle.
So obviously a lot of stuff in that book stands out to you.
It's a good book. It's a good book for Sarah. And I remember this. Oh, Eaton's and I already talked about Midland Cartage, didn't I? You got that. And Labatt's, oh yes. They used to have big trucks with a cab, and then at the back of them, they had like a trailer thing that was like this, and it, their horn were all fixed, so when the driver used to press it for kids, you know, because kids, we go like this out the back of the car, and they go, "Here comes Labatt's!" That's the way it sounds. And Gorman and Eckert, they were the ones who made all the seasonings. That was a good place to work. Oops. Byron Swayze. Kingsville's store is older than the Dominion of Canada. Yes. That's where I bought the dress that I wore when your mother got married. Oh,
Well,
I know you have to go. Looking west from Richmond. But there's a streetcar.
you're welcome to keep the book and look at it for a few days if you would like.
Do you need any more? What's that?
All right, well, Grandma, I think we're going to wrap it up because we're dying. Our battery's dying here.
Okay.
But we want to say thank you. We'll leave you in your revelry over there with the London Remembers book.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for your time today. It was very interesting talking to you about
I wish
your
I
time
could,
in London.
I wish I could remember more.
Well, you remembered quite a lot. So it's interesting to see how life has changed.
Well, if you want any more, just tell Amie what you want. I'll bend her ear.
All right.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.